Feminists. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I am Amy Goodman as we turn now to part 2 of the debate over the sex crime allegations against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Freed on bail in London, Assange hasn't been charged, but he is wanted in Sweden for questioning on sex crimes allegations. Assange and his supporters have said the case is part of a wider conspiracy to discredit him because of his work with WikiLeaks. But that argument has been criticized by some in the feminist community who've accused WikiLeaks supporters of minimizing violence against women. Well, yesterday in Democracy Now! We were joined by 2 guests, Jaclyn Friedman, Executive Director of Women, Action and the Media, and editor of the anthology Yes Means Yes, Visions of Female Sexual Power in a World Without Rape, and Naomi Wolf, a social critic, author of 7 books, including The Beauty Myth and The End of America. Today, we go to part 2 of their debate. After we ended the live broadcast, Jaclyn Friedman talked about her definition of consent.
My book, Yes Means Yes, proposes a new model of consent, and it works like this. It is the responsibility of every party to a sexual encounter to not just make sure that someone is not lying there terrified of them, not objecting, but to actively make sure they're consenting. And this is a model that's being increasingly adopted because it puts everybody in the driver's seat. Everybody who's participating with somebody else sexually has a responsibility to make sure that their partner is enthusiastic what's happening. I mean, really, in a practical sense, would you want to have sex with someone who is not enthusiastic? None of us would, I think, if we're not sexual predators. And so when we talk about consent and we talk about whether or not she literally said the word no, we have to talk about the context. He had ripped her necklace. He had held her down. She was afraid. A lot of women have been taught that they can do nothing against someone who wants to rape them. And the best thing to do is to go along so they don't get further hurt. And a lot of women operate with that fear. Further, if we look at the second case, she was asleep. A woman who is asleep, a person who is unconscious, is unable to consent. They're also unable to object. So if you initiate sex with a sleeping person, you are sexually assaulting them, and that is perfectly clear.
I, too, worry about the fact that rape is so rarely taken seriously and that victims of very cut-and-dried crimes have very little chance of any kind of legal hearing around the world, including in the West, including in Scandinavia. But I would say that it's exactly this kind of treatment of this kind of situation that undermines the seriousness with which rape victims are likely to get a response. If you look, again, Jaclyn, I urge you to look at this report from the police again and again and again.
I fully have.
Can I just finish? Thank you. Again and again and again, Assange did what Jaclyn and everyone who cares about rape and I say you should do. He consulted with the women. Now, if you're going to say that, anyone who takes someone's clothes off, in an assertive way is engaging in a sex crime, then a lot of people who are having consensual sex are going to be, criminalized. But the point is he stopped when women said, let's talk about the condom. He discussed it. They reached an agreement, and they went ahead. He didn't have sex with that woman when she was asleep. I agree that you need to be awake and conscious and not drunk to consent. We agree about that.
He did have sex. That's the allegation, is that he started when she was asleep. That is the allegation.
Well, he started to have sex with her when she was asleep, correct? And she said in her
and that's rape.
Just bear with me, that she was half asleep. Then she woke up. Then they discussed how they would have sex, under what conditions, which is, to me, negotiating consent. Your model is not a new one. With all due respect, I agree that people need to be clear about consent, be clear about the circumstances. Then they had a negotiation in which they both agreed not to use a condom. And then he went ahead and they made love. And what I'm trying to say is,
negotiate. They did not make love.
Well, I guess neither you nor I were there, and it seems to me that when you say, okay, you better not have HIV, he said, of course not. Quote, she couldn't be bothered to tell him one more time because she had been going on about the condom all night. To me, if I was making love with a woman, if I was a lesbian making love with a woman, we had that conversation, I would keep making love with her because we had had a discussion about it and reached a conclusion. All I'm saying is I think that this, again, never in 23 years of supporting rape victims, people who had no ambiguity, who didn't throw parties for their rapists 4 days later, who didn't continue to host. I mean, women who've been raped, in my experience, don't want to be around their rapists. They don't host them in their home. They can barely go home if there's been an assault in their home.
I find it surprising, then, that you've been around many women who've been raped, because the women I talk to who've been raped, 70 to 80% of all sexual assaults are committed by people who know their assailant.
course that's true.
That creates a lot of, okay, I'm talking now. That creates a lot of difficulty in terms of complex feelings afterwards, the ability for the rapist to emotionally manipulate them, and people like you are doing, minimizing their experiences.
I am not minimizing the experience of rape. I'm asking women to behave
I am speaking now.
And men as moral adults and take responsibility for their actions.
I go to a lot of Take Back the Night talks on college campuses because I'm invited to speak there. And I hear the same story over and over again. I hear the story from women who were sexually assaulted by someone they knew, sometimes continued to date them, sometimes continued to live with them because they didn't know that they had rights. They didn't know that what was being done to them was something that was not okay and that they could speak up about. They were afraid, they were confused, and they don't tell anybody. And then they get up at these talks and they say, I didn't tell anybody for 3 years. I let this keep going on because I didn't know that I had any better choices. And it's been making me suffer in silence for 3 years because I haven't had access to any services or support. And that's the story I hear from trauma victims over and over again. And what I'm trying to do, and these are real rape victims too, right? Like real rape doesn't necessarily
Jaclyn,
involve getting punched in the face, getting drugged.
Can I respond to you, please? Do you agree? Please. And I think this is so important. For feminism to be successful, it is not about giving women a home court advantage. It's about justice. And it is so important that the rule of law operates impartially. So just bear with me. Do you agree that men, or anyone who's the sexual initiator, because of course men can get raped, women can engage in unwelcome or non-consensual advances, do you agree that men deserve to know when something is not consensual? I mean, I too have heard stories that alarm me of young women, and God bless them, my heart goes out to them, right? But this is not the end result of feminism. This is not us evolving to the place we need to get. They say, well, halfway through I was having sex with this guy and I felt raped. And I said, well, did you say anything? No. Did you indicate anything? No. I just felt. I felt it. So I would agree that that's a failure of society.
That is not what happened in this case.
In this case, you're right.
He held the woman down. He raped another while she was sleeping. If someone asked me 20 times, do I want to have sex with them, or do I want to have sex without a condom, or whatever sexual act we're negotiating, and I say no 20 times, and the 21st time I say yes because I am worn down, and because I'm being pressured and coerced, and I'm afraid, and because I woke up to him already raping me, and I'm freaked out, that is not real consent. That is not a chance to have actual consent.
I guess, you and I will have you and I will have to part ways, because I would like to see a world in which women and men are both treated as moral adults, and a world in which if someone's going to be accused of something as serious as rape, which is the most serious crime short of murder, or violent physical abuse, that both parties take it very, very seriously. And in this particular situation where he stops and consults with these women again and again and again, and they consent verbally and directly again and again and again.
He was coercing.
Well, you and I have to agree to disagree about that, because I would like to see a world in which...
In my moral universe, where everyone is an adult moral actor, people are only having sex with people who are enthusiastic about what they're doing at all times and enthusiastic about the circumstances. If you are pressuring your lover into something, if you are coercing them, if you are having sex with them without consent when they are asleep, that is not a moral actor. That is morally unjustifiable.
I mean, in a way, Amy, I have to say, I find this conversation extremely frustrating and wrong, because really, and this is why I was reluctant to have this particular debate. Here we are debating, nuances of what is to me working 23 years with rape victims, a highly ambiguous situation compared to the cut and dried, clear assaults and violence and date rapes that do not get a legal hearing every day, including in Sweden. Whereas really the issue is a man who has, released information showing wrongdoing at the highest levels being dragged out of the line of justice, out of any kind of ordinary treatment, of ordinary assault. And by the way, these women did not make charges against him. They went to the police to see if they could get him to take an STD test. The police, the state brought charges.
Explain that. We have talked about that.
It is a very important distinction. And, when I worked with rape survivors in the United Kingdom in the 80s, there was the same situation where it was the state and not the women who pursued the case. And this very much marginalized what the women wanted. So let us remember, the women didn't go to the police and say, this guy assaulted me, or this guy violated me, or this guy molested me. That's not what happened. They went to the police, much subsequent, and said, can we get him to take an STD test? And the police walked them through what had happened, and the police said, that's against the law.
She is alleged to have held one woman down and to have raped a woman in her sleep. It's not at all about the condom. The condom is an issue, but to make it about the condom, the issue here is that we are minimizing the attempt for 2 women in Sweden to get justice. And what that tells victims everywhere across the world is that they're not going to have a chance either. What we should be doing is taking this as an opportunity to raise the bar internationally for the way we expect governments to protect their citizens, including
and that
female
involves
victims
having a single standard of justice, and a single standard of justice where rape victims and those accused of rape can be sure that the state will and the judiciary will take appropriate
and the way to be sure is to make sure your partners are enthusiastically consenting. I have to say, I'm really offended by your continuing to talk on behalf of rape victims as a rape victim.
I'm speaking on behalf of the rape victims who are emailing me. You do not speak for me. I'm not saying I speak for you, Jaclyn.
And I'm speaking on behalf of the rape victims that I work with every day, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself as a rape victim whose situation was accused to have not been cut and dried. Because you know what most women hear when they allege rape? They hear, oh, well, it's ambiguous. We really can't do much about this. You know how endemic that is, and how much that is the reason rape is not reported and prosecuted?
Well, I do,
is the exact thing you're saying
Jaclyn,
right here.
Which is
oh,
why
it's not a real cut and dried rape.
Jaclyn,
and that is insulting
please do not
to victims
twist
worldwide.
What I'm saying. What I'm saying is, it's because
you just said it. There's tape. We can watch it back.
Let's do one at a time.
This is a really important issue, and it's important for us to have a substantive debate about it, and ideally a respectful debate. So it is because I take the issue of rape so seriously, and it's because so many women, and when I say I don't mean ambiguous like date rape or ambiguous like she was drinking too much. I mean ambiguous like she consented and consented and consented. That is a big difference. I, too, support women.
That's not what happened here.
Okay.
Jaclyn and Naomi, let me interrupt for 1 second and say, what would you like to see happen at this point in this case? So you have Julian Assange, who was held for a week in jail on allegations of sexual assault. He has been released. What do you want to see happen right now? What do you each think would be fair?